Good evening and welcome to Cepher Moments. It's good to see everyone here and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another presentation of Cepher Publishing Group on the topic of a garment without a seam. Now, I must tell you, I've been thinking about this for better than a week, actually, about this particular topic. I was looking at another topic and decided, no, I've got to move forward with this one because this one I think is kind of an interesting subject when you think about it and how it appears in one of the Gospels, one of the Besarah. And we have this discussion about a garment without a seam. So I started doing a little bit of research on it. And there's some people out there claiming that a seamless garment was invented only as recently as 1984. Oh, by the way, I want to say hi to everybody. Hi, Eileen and Joshua and Pat and Andrea and Sherry and Troop Seeker and Light and Jack Cranford and Judy Keel. So glad you guys are here. So glad you're taking part of the subscribers section and chatting with us as we go through this tonight, because I'm going to be looking for some feedback tonight as we deal with this topic, a garment without a seam. And like I say, somebody claimed that they had invented this in 1984. Now, today in the modern world, there are many garments without seams. And typically they're like form-fitting garments, uh, like yoga pants or something like this. I think yoga pants have seams, frankly. But I think there's other garments that are like undershirts or something like this that are made without a seam. But the seamless garment we're talking about is something that I think is indicative of many, many things. And we have to take a look at this and see what's there. I want to say hi to Donna Highsmith and Yakov Rishon. Yeah, good to see you guys from Australia. And it's just great to have you all here, Anthony Marquez and Mr. Higginbotham and all of that. And Rain Crusett, yeah, nice to see you here. And so it's just good to have you guys here with us. And joining us, Kyle Weatherwax. It's great to hear of you on our subscribing channel. So anyway, to cut back into this, we have modern garments that are seamless. Typically wool might be some of those garments, or some of the synthetic garments and that are made without seam, or at least close to being made without seam. But as we talked about last Shabbat, a seamless garment in the ancient world would be very difficult to make. And it becomes even more difficult depending on how much we're talking about. Uh, how much of a garment we're talking about. For instance, if you have a garment that is just rectangular and you poke a hole in it for the head, well, that's not that big of a deal that might be seamless. But if you're talking about something that is a little bit more difficult, like something with sleeves, well, that's going to be a problem. And I want to say, okay, hey, Bruce from Missouri, and hi, Tay from the coast of California. And it's good to see Anthony Marquez from Oregon and Bria from Oregon. Good to see you guys. I'm so glad you guys are here. And blessings to the entire Western coast, huh? Blessing to the entire Western coast, and blessing to those of you who are in the central U.S., particularly the Missouri area. What a gorgeous area that is, and a great place for many believers. And of course, our friends from Texas and from down in that region, Texas, Oklahoma. Those of you who are from the deep South, including Tennessee, may not seem that deep to those people who live in Tennessee, but once you're south of the Mason-Dixon line, it's all over. Anyway, it's just so good to have all of you here. And of course, when we talk about this particular topic, there is a metaphorical reason that goes into a garment without a seam. And we're going to be looking at that metaphorical reason a little bit. But there is something else that's happening here. And we're going to see this as kind of, we see this throughout the scripture. For instance, when we talk about the branch, right? The branch. And Mashiach would say, I am the vine, you are the branches. But yet in Zechariah, there is a prophecy about Mashiach being called the branch. Yahusha would be called the branch, Sameach. And in other cases, Netzer. And so when we say, and here is a Yahusha, HaNetzari, from Nazareth, the Nazarene, right? HaNetzari. but it's also my branch, my branch. Yahusha, my branch, the Netzari, my branch. And when you think about this, Mashiach, when he says, I am the vine, you are the branches, he is telling us that he is the tree of life. Now, I want us to consider this for just a moment. I know this is a little bit off topic concerning the garment without a seam, but I just want to throw it out to you and see what you think. You know, when you talk about the Torah of Moshe, Paul tells us some interesting things in his discussion. He said, if it were not for the Torah, we would have no knowledge of sin. We wouldn't know that we were sinning because there was nothing to tell us it was sinful. And so, for instance, we have the proscriptions given to us in Leviticus 18 concerning marrying your cousin or marrying your mother-in-law or marrying your mother or your father or your grandfather or your grandmother. There's a great discussion about this, by the way, in Philo concerning marrying the wrong person and ending up becoming your own grandpa, as the song goes, which is possible, right? If you do not have respect for the marital rules, the distancing rules in Leviticus 18. So there are many things that are defined in the Torah of Moshe that didn't exist prior to the Torah of Moshe, standards of behavior that said you can't do this and you can't do that. For instance, the Torah provides that you can't marry your sister, but yet Abraham married his sister. The Torah provides you can't marry a woman and her sister, and yet Yaakov married Leah and Rachel, a woman and her sister. So we see that there is some things that were taking place prior to Moshe's Torah that were not considered sin. And yet John tells us in First John that sin is the transgression of the Torah. And the Torah, remember, is the instruction. But think about this for a minute. The instruction as to what? What is the Torah the instruction of? The Torah is the instruction of good and evil. The Torah is the instruction of good and evil. This is good. This is evil. This is blessing. This is cursing. And so we see that the sinful behavior of man walks right into like the chainsaw of the Torah, if you will, because the sinful behavior is executing sin, irrespective of whether or not the Torah is actually written. And so we see that mankind follows after the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, as compared to following after the tree of life, which is in Mashiach, who said, I am the vine, you are the branches. He is the one called the branch, Hanetzeri, Hasameach. He is that entity, the branch. And so we see that the tree of life is something from which we eat regularly because we are in Mashiach, right? We're in Mashiach. And so that is part of this. Okay, now let's see, just a minute. Jason Lee. Okay, Jason Lee writes, Shalom, brothers and sisters. Repentance and water baptism, keeping the commandments and love one another. Prepare for battle. World War III, the last war. Bible prophecy, inevitable war. Before the return of Yahshua HaMashiach. Yeah, here it is. And hi, Sherry Papin. Here we see that, yeah, we have the idea of war and rumors of war that are abounding now around us. And it's a very interesting time in which we live. But, okay, let's take a look and see where we are in a garment without a seam. Okay, so citations are from the Cepher Millennium Edition. And yeah, so by the way, we do have the large print in stock right now, which is a real blessing that was able to come together. And don't forget, when you get your Cepher, think about getting the tabs in order to, find your place in the book. It's very interesting because I've been reading the Cepher, of course, now for, well, it's been 11 years. And no, 12 years, going on 12 years, yeah. And when I was in Portugal, I picked up a Portuguese Bible and I was going to read from the Portuguese Bible. And my problem was finding my place in the Portuguese Bible because I was having a hard time remembering the order of the 66 book Bible, but it came back to me in time. Anyway, so we'll be taking citations from the Cepher Millennium Edition. All right. Now Yasharel loved Yosef more than all of his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. All right. Now we know Dolly Parton once cut a song called Coat of Many Colors, which, rang well inside the country community. And she did really well with that song of the Coat of Many Colors. But let's take a look at that a little bit and see what's going on with the coat of many colors. Okay, so here is the Ivrit, right? Yasharel and Yasharel ahav et Yosef, and Yasharel loved Joseph, right? And here, so this gives us a chance to do a little annotating, which is always the best part of this, right? Va Yasharel. Yasharel ahav, there you go, loved et Yosef. Yasharel loved et Yosef. And we can see here, Michal banav ki ben Zekunim hulu bat sasha lo ketonet pasim. Lo ketonet pasim. Now this is the term, the Hebrew term for the coat of many colors. The coat of many colors, ketonet pasim. All right, now here's one of the difficulties we see, because when we talk about a coat of many colors, as it's defined in the English, we don't have that term given to us in the New Testament, which is kind of too bad it's not there given to us in the New Testament, because this is going to be kind of dispositive, telling us what exactly it was that Mashiach was wearing. Well, let's get into this a little bit and see. When we talk about this here a little bit. So here is ketonet, and this comes from an unused root, meaning to cover. Okay, so this is something that's going to cover, i.e., it's going to be a shirt, a coat, a garment, or a robe. So it's any one of these things. It could be a shirt, you could call it a coat, you could call it just merely a garment, or you could even call it a robe. All right. So does that tell us whether or not there's sleeves on it? I mean, it really doesn't. Does it tell us it's something more than just a square that you put over your head with a hole in it? Well, let's see. A katev is its root, and it comes from an unused root, meaning to clothe. Okay, clothing, right? To clothe the shoulder, as in the upper end of the arm. Okay, now this is much more specific, as being the spot where the garments hang, figuratively, a side piece or lateral projection of anything, the arm or corner or shoulder piece. Okay, so now we're starting to get somewhere that, in fact, what's being talked about is that if we had, let's put up here like a t-shirt here, right? We've got like a sleeveless t-shirt. So here's the shirt. Is this something that's going to be covered by a ketonet? No, because it has to close the shoulder. So there's something like this. At a bare minimum, there is something like this in this garment. Okay? There's something like this, something that clothes the shoulders in this garment. Okay. So we can see that from the katef, that's what it's talking about. Now, we get another word in the coat of many colors, which is, of course, pas, right? And we saw that it was ketonet pasim, which meant that this is in a plural form. Okay, so the pas here is the root, and this means it's going to tell us that this is what? This is a masculine noun, okay, meaning the palm of the hand or the sole of the foot. By implication, plural, a long and sleeved tunic. Okay, now you see this? So we're talking about a long and sleeved tunic. So when we say ketonet pasim, you're talking about a coat that has long sleeves, or you're talking about a garment that has long sleeves. So again, if we're talking about this, let's take a look here. So when we talk about this, we have the neckline here, and then we have, of course, this. a coat with long sleeves. All right, so this is now we have here that Strong's tells us that the generous definition here is diverse colors, a coat of diverse colors. But really, the more express meaning is rather a coat with long sleeves. Okay, now this comes from passas, with the primitive root, meaning to disperse or to disappear, to disperse, to spread out the tunic. And then this comes from pas, the Aramaic, or compares with the Aramaic term pas, from a root which corresponds to this right here, pas, and it means the palm of the hand as being spread out. So you can kind of look at it in terms of if you were to spread out your hand, where does this garment go? Well, if you spread out your hand, you can tell that you got your little finger and your thumb out there to the extremity. That indicates that the garment is spread out over your arms, goes over your arms. Okay, so if this is the garment we're talking about, if this is the garment that Mashiach was wearing, this is an interesting garment, because now you're talking about a garment without seam that has arms that go all the way to the hands, right? Goes all the way to the hands. Well, all right. So that's going to be a little bit of an interesting creation. Now, let's continue. So in Genesis, we see in 37:23, and it came to pass when Yosef was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Yosef out of his coat of many colors that was on him. So they took his coat away from him, and we're going to see what happens here. It's not good. And they took Yosef's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. All right. Now, this is here a very strong metaphor. Dipped the coat in the blood of the kid of the goats. Okay. So what we see here is something quite interesting, because let's say that it was a coat of many colors, and that this coat of many colors represented that Yosef would end up speaking the 70 languages of the kingdom, and he would ascend to the throne of Pharaoh by learning all these languages, and would end up representing an extremely diverse population of people throughout everywhere in the world, right? That is one implication we get from this idea of a coat of many colors. Okay. However, if this is just a coat with long sleeves, and that's what's being said, this ketonet pas is just a coat of long ketonet pasim, a coat with long sleeves. They took this coat and they dipped it in the blood of the goats. Now, if you recall, in Passover, we're required to do a number of things. We have to dip hyssop in the blood of the kid of the goats. And the Pesach instruction says you can kill a lamb without blemish of 1 year, of either a sheep or a goat. Okay, so a lamb of a goat can also be killed for the Pesach. So we can see that a kid of the goats is probably a 1-year-old, and the coat is being dipped in the blood of the goat. So this is now, and again, this business of dipping in the Hebrew is this word tabal. Tabal. And this word is, I think, much more appropriate than mikveh. Okay? It's much more appropriate than mikveh, because when you talk about mikveh, you're talking about a ceremonial bathing. But when we talk about baptism, when we talk about our baptism, we're talking about being immersed. And we're talking about being immersed like the hyssop was immersed in the blood of the lamb, that the blood of the lamb would then be struck on the doorposts, on the side and the top of the doorpost, in order to have death pass over. And so really the baptism is, in my opinion, it's closer to a tabal, where we are the hyssop, than than a mikvah, where we're put into a bath for cleanliness. By the way, Andrea, thank you for your comments on the reading of Joseph and Asenath. I don't know how long I'll be able to continue to read it, because I think I might get through it tomorrow, but I'm going to read the rest of the text. Yeah, I think it might take me a couple more days to read it. but we're going to finish reading Joseph and Asenath. It's such a wonderful story. I love the story, and it's got such great meaning. But at any rate, going back to the tabal here. So when we talk about this idea of this coat is dipped in blood of the goat, this tells you that irrespective of Joseph's calling and of Joseph's ministry and so on and so forth, that this is going to project that the life of Joseph from this point forward is a life that is marked with a baptism in the blood of the Lamb. It's a baptism in the blood of the Lamb. And so even though all the things that happen are unknown to his father and and even his brothers, and he goes to Egypt and becomes a great leader of the whole of Mitzrayim, we see it that this is a part of it, that it's the coat is dipped in blood. Now, one can imagine that Mashiach, at the point of his crucifixion, that his coat too was also covered in blood. Now we see here, and they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, "This have we found. Know now whether it be your son's coat or not." Is it his or not? I mean, we don't know. We just found this. So what do we know? Is it your son's? We don't know. And he knew it, and he said, "It is my son's coat, and an evil beast has devoured him. Yosef is without doubt rent in pieces." Okay. Are you guys not hearing anything? Are you getting audio? Let me just double check that, make sure you're getting audio. Are you getting audio? Can somebody confirm if you're getting audio? Okay. They balled themselves 7 times. Yeah, you guys are good. Okay, great. I think you are hearing it. Okay. Hi, Michael Finley in Portugal. Blessings to you, brother. I know it's late. Thank you for taking part of this. And Elroy says Nayat tabald himself seven times. Yeah, these are all very important points. And so I'm hoping you guys are hearing me. Okay, you can hear. Okay, great. All right. Okay, let's go on to the next slide here. So we can see here, and what of the coat found in the Besserot? Now, this is something here that's very interesting, because when we look at the word for coat in the Besserot, we're going to find something really interesting. Hey, hi, Tony Wright in Cornwall. Good to hear you, brother. Glad to see you here. And Yahusha said, "I am, and you shall see the son of Adam sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest rent his clothes and said, "What need we of any further witness?" Okay, so here when you see the high priest saying, okay, he rent his clothes right here. Now, this is the exact same word, only in the plural form, that we're going to find for the garment made without seam. Okay, exact same thing. The garment made without seam is going to be this same word here. And this, I find it very interesting, because what do you think, if the priest is renting his clothes, what do you think they look like? I mean, do you think that the priest was wearing, a tank top like this? I don't think so, because nobody would wear a tank top that looked that bad. But I don't think that the priest is wearing a tank top at this point. I think the priest is wearing a garment that is of substance. He's got he has some kind of an over garment, that they call it a coat, but it's an overgarment that is sleeved and seamless. Okay. All right. So let's take a look here and see what we're dealing with. So the word here, the word for clothes there is hitanas. Hitanas. Bears with hitanas. Okay. So the word is hiton, like this, hiton, and it's spelled here in the singular. This is the singular, right? And this is the plural, hitonas. And so with this hiton, what's it tell us about this word? You recall that the Hebrew word here is ketonet. So what does Strong's tell us about this word? Well, it's a masculine noun of foreign origin. Yeah, which foreign origin? Well, it's telling us right here. It comes from the Hebrew 3801. So this is one of the few words that we have in Greek that's exactly the same word as it is in Hebrew, right? Except the plural form is different. Okay. So chiton, and it means what? A tunic. A tunic. Or you could say a shirt. You could say clothes, a coat, or a garment. But we saw before that we've got pretty good reason to believe that the chiton or the chitonas is something that is a more formal garment than just a shirt. It's some kind of an outer tunic, some kind of an outer tunic, and it's an outer tunic, what appears to have sleeves going all the way to the hands, sleeves going all the way to the hands. Okay, all right. So when we look at what happens in John, we have this. Then the soldiers, when they had crucified Yahusha, took his garments and made four parts, to every soldier a part, and his coat also. Now the coat was without seam. Okay, and this word here is chiton. The coat was without seam, woven from the top throughout. Okay, very interesting garment if in fact it had sleeves and was woven throughout. So what would that tell you? Let's speculate a little bit on what that tells us. Yeah, now here Jack Cranford asks, the Talid Katan. Yeah, now Jack, that is kind of similar, but the Katan in the Ivrit is the opposite of Gadul. So Talit Gadul is the big Talit. The Talit Katan is the little Talit. And you know that, when you get a little Talit, if you buy a little Talit, oftentimes it's just a square with a hole in it. And you've got the four corners upon which you can fasten your seat, the Talit Katan. But I think the Katan, even though it's close to Ketonet, I think they're distinct enough to say, okay, it's some kind of a robe, some kind of a garment. Now, maybe it is just a cloak. Maybe it is just a robe. Maybe it just comes over the shoulders. Maybe it's one of these things that where you have. Excuse me, just a minute. I'll go back to this for just a minute. But maybe it's one of these things where you have, you've got basically it's just a square like this, only it covers the shoulders, right? So you have a robe like this that covers the shoulders, and then maybe there's a little chain that holds it around your neck here like this, one of these kinds of things. Now, in which case, this would be, I think you might be onto something here, that this is probably a little bit more like it, that this was it has a shoulder covering and it disperses where you can put your arms under it, but in fact, it's just a cloak. I mean, that's a very good chance that that's what we're dealing with here. Okay, let me clear that. Okay, let me go back one here just a moment. I need to go back. So, because when we look at this, let's see here. The soldiers, when they had crucified him, they said, therefore, among themselves, let us not rend it, but let's cast lots for it. Whose it shall be, that the scripture might be fulfilled, which says, they parted my raiment among them, and for my vesture they did cast lots. For my vesture. So a vesture is going to tell us something else too. For my robe, right? For my vesture, they did cast lots. So, all right. So I think we can see here that this coat that was without a seam is something that is inordinate to, let's call them, inexpensive carpenters or people who are making a living fishing. That this, yeah, Tony says definitely not a pink tank top. Yeah, there it is, Tony. Yeah, definitely not a pink tank top. No kidding. So when we're talking about this, I think that this may have been that this was an expensive garment. They took a look at it and said, it may have been covered with blood and everything else. And they said, yeah, this is a garment that is not worth splitting up, but rather let us keep it in its original condition. Yeah. Yeah, like the capes in the original Battlestar Galactica. Yeah, yeah, that's probably right. It's kind of like that. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So now it's something interesting about these garments, right? These garments took his garments. And I want to share this with you because we have something here that's again kind of interesting because in the forecast that comes into this next prophecy from Isaiah 61:1, the Ruach Adonai Yahweh is upon me because Yahweh has anointed me to preach the Besorah unto the meek. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, the recovery of sight to the blind, and the opening of the prison to them that are bound. Okay, all of this, I think, is in respect of the destruction of Jerusalem. He's going to bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim liberty to those taken captive in Babylon, the recovery of the sight to the blind who missed the Torah, and the opening of prison to them that are bound. Okay, outstanding. All directed, I think, to the end of the kingdom of Yahud. Now we get the next part of this prophecy, which is very important to proclaim the acceptable year of Yahweh and the day of vengeance of our Elohim, to comfort all that mourn. Okay, so here we go. Comfort all those who mourn from the destruction of the kingdom, to appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, those who remain in Zion after the destruction of Jerusalem, to give unto them beauty for ashes. Because what happened with the ashes? Well, the temple was burned. Well, the fortress was burned. Well, the city was burned. So I'm going to give you beauty for those ashes. I'm going to give you the oil of joy for your mourning. And I'm going to give you the garment of praise. The garment of praise for the ruach of heaviness, that they might be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of Yahweh, the planting of Yahweh, that he might be glorified. Now, I think this gives us some indication that there would be uh, a garment of praise associated with the oaks of righteousness. All right. Now, does this mean that everybody gets a red robe like a cardinal does? No, but I think there may be something here to uh, that has to do with this garment. Now, Donna says, "I sew, and that would be a task with no seam." I'm thinking in the flesh, but maybe with a type of muumuu, and the desire of to be torn and divided must have been sought after. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like when you talk about a type of muumuu, again, we could be talking about, I mean, if you're talking about something that has sleeves, it's just going to be enormously difficult to sew from the top down, from the top. And this, it says it was crafted from the top down as a seamless garment. Now, some of the pictures I saw when I was looking at this of some of the artifacts where people claim that they've got this robe or that they have this garment, that it is a garment that is like a tunic with sleeves. Okay, so it kind of flares out at the bottom, about thigh high, and it's got sleeves that flare out at the wrist. And they're claiming we have the garment, and these are some of the pictures that I've seen. So people that have pictured this in their mind are thinking that it's a sleeved garment. Okay. Yeah, no, Sherry says sometimes knitted items will have no seams. Yeah, it's possible. And if you're talking about from the top down, that, it might be possible, but I mean, I can just see this thing as a very difficult thing to do. Okay. All right. So let's see here. Now, let's talk about where they think this thing is. Okay. According to the tradition of the Georgian Orthodox Church, the chiton was acquired by a Jewish rabbi from Georgia named Elios, who was present in Jerusalem at the time of the crucifixion and bought the robe from a soldier. He brought it with him when he returned to his native town of Metzheta, Georgia, where it is preserved to this day beneath a crypt in the patriarchal Svieti Skoveli Cathedral. Svieti Skoveli Cathedral. The feast day in honor of the Chiton is celebrated on the 1st of October. Now, I can tell you, I have been in that cathedral. I've been in that very cathedral in Metzheta. Now, if you guys don't mind for me taking just a little bit of take a little bit of a side trip here, and I can give you a little bit of kind of what happened at Mecheta. Now, Mecheta is a very interesting place. It is north of Tbilisi in Georgia, and you have two rivers that come together at the situs of this town. One river is flowing north and south, and that's the pretty good sized river. Then there's another river that comes in from the west, and it comes into a hard granite wall. And so it becomes a T junction into this river. It's not like a merge in like a Y like you usually see. This is a T junction. The river comes in a T junction, and this huge granite wall erupts right there. Now, above the wall, well up above the city, like I would say more than 1,000 feet, is what's called the Javari Monastery. And the Javari Monastery is a small temple that sits on top of this 1,000-foot promenade, looking down at the confluence of these two rivers. And right at in the northwestern corner of the confluence is this town, Mecheta. So the town Mecheta is at the northwestern corner of this confluence of these two rivers. And in this town is the most holy site in all of Georgian Orthodoxy, which is the Sveti Skoveli Cathedral. And we went to this cathedral, and Zali Tikishvili took us there, and we went in and we spent some time going through the cathedral, and including walking the outer grounds. And it was kind of terrifying, really, because it looked like they had handcuffs on the outside of the wall for holding people. There was the burial ground of a very famous woman in Orthodox history that she had at one time, after she died, there was apparently some tree that levitated above her grave. And so they have a big painting of her inside the Mecheta Cathedral with this log coming up off her grave and going straight up into the heavens. But inside the church, they also had on one wall a gigantic sign of the zodiac. They had a huge zodiac symbol. And at the cupola of this church, they had a bull's head looking down from the cupola over the church. So it was a very dark place, would be one way of putting it. And the Orthodox priest was, in fact, engaged in dealing with confession and communion and so on over on one side. So it's a very interesting cathedral. It's a very interesting place. I had no idea that the Hiton was there because nobody mentioned it, right? All right. So let's see. The legend declares that the Persian Shah, Abbas I, when he invaded Georgia, and Georgia was always getting invaded by everybody, right? When he invaded Georgia, he carried off the robe. But at the insistence of the Russian ambassador and Tsar Michael Feodorovich, the Shah sent the robe as a gift to Patriarch Filaret between 1619 and 1633, and Tsar Michael in 1625. The authenticity of the robe was attested to by Nectarius, the Archbishop of Vologda, by Patriarch Theophanes of Jerusalem, and by Dionysius the Greek. So we had the Patriarch of Jerusalem in the Orthodox tradition, and the Patriarch of Dionysius the Greek in the Greek Church, also attesting to this fact that the robe was authentic, as it was attested to by Nectarius, the Archbishop of Vologda. The reports also circulated at that time of miraculous signs being worked through the relic. Okay, so we have this that says, okay, and oh, yeah, see, look at that. Now, Valerie Seals has got something quite interesting here. And let me see if I can actually, if I can read that, if I can pull up that passage. Let me see what I can get going here. We'll see if we can pull something off. And we can take a look at that passage in Exodus 28, 4 and 5. One moment here. I'm going to see what I can do here. Get something open here. Let's see if we can get this going here. And at any rate, okay, so let's see. Yeah, that would be interesting because what you're talking about there becomes very interesting as the priest himself that was offended by Mashiach's testimony ripped his garments. He ripped his garments. So, and it's the same word that is being used for Mashiach, right? Okay, let me see. 28. One moment. Okay, just 1 second here. Got to catch up with you. Okay, so you said Exodus 28, 4 and 5. Let me see if I can find that. 28, 4 and 5, yes. And so 28, 4 reads, and these are the garments which they shall make, a breastplate and an ephod and a robe and a broidered coat, a turban and a belt, and they shall make holy garments for Aharon your brother and his sons, that he may minister to me in the priest's office, and they shall take gold and blue and purple and scarlet and fine linen. Well, a very fascinating find, I must add. And the question is, were these people, did the high priest have a garment that this was unrippable? And equally important, this distinguishes between a robe and a broidered coat. Now, the language that's used in the New Testament in determining this is for Mashiach, it's talking about his coat. It's talking about his coat. But the same word used in describing Caiaphas's garments were clothes, not coat. All right, now let me see here. Let's see here, 28:4, just a minute. Okay. Okay. Just a minute. I'm taking a look here. Okay, the ephod. And then here we have the robe. Okay, so the robe is mechil. Mechil is the robe. Mechil. And the coat, guess what? The broidered garment, guess what the word is? Ketonet. Ketonet. That's in Exodus 28:4. The word appearing there is ketonet. All right. So this is quite outstanding, actually, and it's a very good catch. So when you're talking about what we're talking about here, ketonet being used in Exodus 28:4 is interpreted as a broidered coat, a broidered coat. So this tells you that the coat that Mashiach was wearing was something, it was really something quite distinct, something really quite distinct. Okay, now Sherry asked the question, did Yahushua's mother make the robe for him? Now, I don't know if that's the case. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. We don't know. I mean, again, the scriptures are cryptic about the source of this coat. But could this be the same garment that the woman with the issue of blood touched and was healed? I think that's the case. I do think that's the case, Kyle. And I think when you talk about the hem of that garment, and that's what they were talking about, the border of the garment, they touched the border of the garment. Was this the border of the garment that was, that carried the fringe that would amount to the tzitzit, right? And so Lily says, I thought Yahshua wasn't a Levite and didn't serve in that capacity. Yeah, he did not serve in that capacity, but yet he had this garment. Now, this is why I'm saying that this garment that he had was something quite unusual. Okay, and that's why I'm trying to bring this up, because the mystery of this is one that is, I think, quite profound, because the mystery of this garment may go to other things, garments of praise, and that Mashiach, a non-Levite, was carrying a garment of praise, was wearing a garment of praise, a garment of high value. Now, Braden asked the question here, anybody remember the book or the movie The Robe, starring Victor Mature, circa 1950s? Yeah, I think that was who was the guy that used to do those epic, Cecil B. DeMille. I think it was a big Cecil B. DeMille deal. And so Rick Johnson gives a thumb up on Braden. Christine Pierce adds, prophet, priest, and king. Yeah, this robe was something more than just a priestly garment. It was more than a priestly garment. And you could imagine that if they had this garment at the crucifixion, then he must have been wearing this garment in Gethsemane. he must have been wearing this garment when he was hauled up for the high priest. And that garment was then the garment that the high priest, when he was ripping his garment, the high priest was ripping this broidered garment. And here Mashiach is saying, oh, I'm in a garment that doesn't have any seams. You might recall the movie that Mel Gibson did. The high priest, Caiaphas, when he ripped his garments, talking to Mashiach, he had seams at the shoulders, and that's where they ripped. They had seams at the shoulders, right? Okay, so Exodus 28:7, talking about the coat. Well, let's see. Is that Exodus 28:7? It shall have the two shoulder pieces thereof joined at the two edges thereof, and so it shall be joined together. Yeah. And the belt of the ephod which is upon it shall be of the same, according to the work even of gold, blue, purple, and scarlet, and fine twin. Yes. Now that is a very good point, because we could be seeing that this is why I'm saying that if Mashiach's robe was without seam, we see the robe that the priest is wearing, the coat that the priest is wearing, the broidered coat, is joined at the shoulders. It's joined at the shoulders. So again, we've got Mashiach in a garment that is unusual to everyone else's garment, right? It's unusual, right? Okay. Now, a free to serve, Yosha says, and he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the word of Elohim. Okay, now the vesture dipped in blood, again, and again, we're talking about his vesture. This is a very good word that you've got here, because we talked about in the last prophecy that they divided his garments and cast lots over his quote unquote vesture. And yet the vesture we're talking about dipped in blood, and his name is called the word of Elohim. When you see the vesture dipped in blood, whose vesture was dipped in blood? Yosef's. Yosef's vesture was dipped in blood. And Mashiach is clothed in this vesture dipped in blood. So we see some metaphorical things here that are coming out that are kind of very illustrative. When you look at the vesture dipped in blood that was Yosef's, this was an illusion that was given to Yasharel, that his beloved, his Yakid, Yosef, had died, when in fact Yosef had not died, but he had gone through a suffering that would ultimately result in the deliverance of all of the house of Yasharel. Now, isn't this the same kind of metaphor we see with Mashiach, that he had gone through a suffering, yet his suffering is ultimately going to lead to the salvation of all of Yasharel. And he comes back in vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called Devarim Elohim. Devarim Elohim, the word of Elohim, Devarim Elohim. And so we can see some very interesting stuff here by looking at this idea that Mashiach was wearing something that was like his DNA, completely unique. It was a garment that was completely unique. Okay. And so is the cloak symbolic of zeal as part of a spiritual armor? Yes. Now, this is something else that we're looking at in terms of the metaphorical reasons. A lot of people have looked at this and said, well, the seamless garment means that there's no division inside the belief in Mashiach. That really we're all one. There is no condemnation in Mashiach. We're all one, irrespective of our denominationalism, that we're all one. That's another view of the metaphorical aspects of this scene. But I see it as something else. I see this as Mashiach wearing something foreign. He's wearing something foreign to whatever else was found in Judea at that time. There was no one else that had that garment. He had that garment. No one else had that garment. And how was it that he had that garment? Where did that garment come from? So Kyle says, it reminds me of the coat of skin that Elohim made for Adam and Eve. Yeah, isn't that true? And when we see that idea of the skins of Elohim, or the skins of Adam and Eve that would then, be robbed by Nimrod and ultimately end up in the hands of Esau or Esau, as he would use those skins to secure leadership and rulership over, well, again, I'm going to try to give us some more evidence on this before I make a lot of claims of it today. But yeah, but at any rate, we see that those skins had their own aspect. Now, a lot of people look to this and say, you want to find this particular robe, and this robe is going to have some, a mystical qualities. Now, Valerie says, according to Art Scroll Chumash, the Meil robe is just like a long poncho with no sleeves. The ketonet is illustrated with box-like knit and sleeves. Box-like knit and sleeves. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and again, I mean, the illustrations are such that we have people whose imaginations are kind of like ours, who decide that what they think it's going to look like, right? And do we know what it looked like? No, we don't. But people have imagined all kinds of things as to what it may have been, right? And yeah, and here it is. Sherry Slama puts up that and besought him that they might only touch the seat of his garment, and as many touched him were made perfectly whole. And again, this is the garment that we're talking about, right? Touch the seat of his garment, touching this particular robe, and that this robe had with it or conveyed with it the essence or the ruach of Mashiach while he was wearing it. Okay. Okay, Elroy asked the question, how could Yaakov recognize the coat totally red with blood unless it was seamless? I mean, great point, Elroy. That is a great point. How did he know? I mean, when you bring in this garment, it's ripped up and it's covered with blood, it's covered with dirt and everything else. Yeah, I guess that's my son's coat. Huh? What? He had to recognize it somehow. And if it was that it was a seamless robe, then we see this big connection between the blood, the coat of many colors, the coat, this idea of this ketonet rasim, or pasim, rather, this ketonet pasim that had been dipped in blood, tabal, in the blood of a goat, that is going to represent this symbolism of Yosef in the beginning of his ministry, and that this is tied irreconcilably with the garment of Mashiach, a garment made without seams. Okay, it would have taken many hours to make a very special work of art. Yeah, I agree with that. All born of spirit. I think that's true. Okay, all right, guys. Well, let me finish this up here. Later, two portions of the robe were taken to St. Petersburg, one in the cathedral at the Winter Palace, which is now the Hermitage, and the other in the Cathedral of Peter and Paul. Now, for those of you that have been to St. Petersburg, the Cathedral of Peter and Paul can be seen from pretty much all of downtown St. Petersburg. The fortress of Peter and Paul, it's an island, and you have to go there by boat or by bridge to get onto the island. And it has a huge spire on the Cathedral of Paul, but there it's Cathedral of Peter and Paul on that particular island, and it is a center of Orthodoxy. And I think the patriarch practices at that cathedral. Then, of course, the Cathedral of the Dormition in Moscow also had this. And the Cathedral of the Dormition in Moscow is not St. Basil Sabor or St. Basil's Cathedral in Red Square, the one that's got the colorful onion domes, but rather the Dormition is inside the Kremlin. And small portions were kept at Kiev's Sophia Cathedral. Who knows if those have been robbed or if the cathedral is functioning at all anymore at all. And at the Ipatiev Monastery near Kostroma and at certain other old temples. So it looks to me like the robe has been divided, right? They didn't want to divide it before, but now you got portions of it here and portions of it there. So it looks like it's been divided. All right. Okay. So that kind of concludes our presentation on that particular issue. Now, I want to ask you guys a question. Are there any questions on this? And let's see if we can figure those out. If you've got any questions about anything at all that you would like to ask, I'll be happy to take those questions. Let's see. All right. Very unique type of sign. Okay. All right. It was great list like no other. Yeah, I agree with that, Donna. I think this is a garment that is just is as unusual as Mashiach. And let's see, the cloak of zeal. Yeah, here's another one from Isaiah 59, a cloak of zeal. Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. So with that, I want to thank you guys for joining me today for this presentation on a coat with no seam. And I hope to see you next week. I should be here next week. And we're going to be continuing on with our Sabbath meetings on Saturday morning and the teaching through Cepher Academy. And I just want to say blessings to you guys. Thank you guys for participating in the chat. And we will see you again soon. Okay. So with that, I'm going to say shalom and Baruch atah Bashem Yahusha. Okay. Thank you guys.